Dharwad Katte Dharwad, a special lecture series on Shakespeare. Dear audience, as you know, Dharwad Katte presently running two lecture series, one on makers of modern world theatre and another one on Shakespeare, that is revisiting Shakespeare's drama. The first 2 weeks of every month, first two Saturdays, the lecture series is on makers of modern world theatre that will be in Kannada. And the third and fourth Saturdays, the talks will be in English, that is on Shakespeare. And you all know that Dharwad Katte has started uh, conducting sessions, talks on virtual mode during the COVID pandemic time when the whole world was crushed under the terrible attack of Corona. Since then, uh, based upon the feedback of the audience, we have been conducting several lecture series and special talks, including uh, the birth anniversary of Jnanpith awardees Dr. Rajkumar and renowned writers, and special series like the present ones. In this connection, today is the fourth Saturday of the month. We have a talk in the series of Shakespeare. Today we have a talk by Dr. Manali Karmakar. To this series, I welcome Dr. Manali Karmakar, who has accepted our invitation and uh, giving her talk today. I also welcome Professor Basavaraj Donur, President, Dharwad Katte, and Registrar, Central University of Karnataka. I also welcome all the members of Dharwad Katte, our media persons who have been taking all our events to the every corner of the state. I also welcome our audience who have been with us on this virtual mode and also in our social medias. Before I hand over the stage to Dr. Manali Karmakar, a few words about Madam. Dr. Manali Karmakar is an assistant professor in English at the Vellore Institute of Technology, Chennai campus. She has earned PhD from IIT Guwahati and has specialized in the areas of medical humanities, literary studies, medicine, biotechnology. Her research interests include literature and medicine, posthumanism, and medical health and disability studies. Madam, I welcome you. The pattern of the session is Madam will talk for about 60 minutes, followed by the President's few words. And after the session, we have interaction session also. You can also post your queries, opinions in the chat box as well, which will be considered after the session. So, till then, I request all the audience to kindly mute your audio and video and enjoy the session. Over to Dr. Manali. Madam, please.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, madam, you are audible.
Okay, thank
Please.
you. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Prakash Balikai for giving me this invitation. And it's really a moment of delight for me to share my interest about Shakespeare and how it could be critically analyzed through the lenses of post-human theories. So, and I would also like to congratulate the organizing team for making this event to happen. It's really great to know the way you all have been organizing special lectures for on different perspectives of Shakespeare and drama in the modern world. And I would also like to thank Professor Vasabaraj Donasa. It is always a delight when we go back to the people, to the institution from where we did start our teaching career. So I would like to share my screen with all of you. Just 1 second. Is the screen visible, sir?
Yes, madam, it is visible, madam.
Okay, so I have actually planned my session for approximately 40 minutes, and I thought that I'll be taking my queries post my 40 minutes talk. So let's see how I can stretch my uh, presentation. So when it comes to this presentation, I primarily would like to focus on the Shakespearean drama through the lenses of post-human theory. So now, as the title of this lecture series is Revisiting Shakespeare. So we all know that we have been analyzing the different components of Shakespearean drama through different theoretical perspectives. For example, we have been using the disability studies, we have been using the post-colonial studies in order to rethink about the characters' portrayal, in order to rethink about the events were portrayed by Shakespeare back in the 16th century or the Elizabethan England. So in today's session, what I aim to do is that to try to at least reflect to what extent it is possible to revisit Shakespeare through the lenses of post-human theories. So when I talk about my session, these are the key components that I would like to discuss in my presentation. The first is Renaissance humanism. So I'll be taking little time to explain the how we can actually contextualize the drama in the Renaissance humanism. And when I talk about the Renaissance humanism, I would also like to analyze how the present scholars pertaining to Renaissance humanism are trying to revisit the very notion of human and thereby trying to critically analyze how this notion of human is being dramatized in the Shakespearean dramas. Secondly, I'd also be taking little time to explain the very concept of posthumanism. What is posthumanism and how it could be applied in order to analyze the dramas. So when it comes to the dramas, I've taken three tragedies of Shakespeare. The first is Romeo and Juliet, the second is Hamlet, and the third is Macbeth. So this is the plan of my presentation. So let's begin. So now, when we actually go back to this term Renaissance, and if we really go back to our MAs or the BAs, the way it has been explained to us, it is always said that Renaissance is associated with the rebirth of ideas. And when we talk about the rebirth of ideas, we are talking about science, art, culture, which started approximately around 14th century and it could stretch to 17th century. So now when we talk about this rebirth, traditionally, normatively, I'm repeating that when it comes to our MAs and the BA syllabus, we would like to define this very time frame as the revival of the interest in literature and art from the classical period. So when we talk about the classical period, primarily we will be talking about the Greek and the Roman views of life. Secondly, when we talk about Renaissance, we also talk about that it did emphasize on Latin and philosophy. And thirdly, it also believed that education could bring possible positive change, thereby developing resourceful citizens. So when we talk about Renaissance, it believed in education, its ability to reformulate the mind so that we can have a leap from that animalistic attitudes that we had, and thereby we could have a very refined approach that could be further extended for the benefit of the society. So now, when we talk about the reformation of the mind, when we talk about the citizens, we are talking about the promotion of the private and the civic virtues. And we also did witness the development in commerce. We did witness the development in discovery, scientific approach, innovation. So all these concepts are very much there whenever we talk about Renaissance. So I believe that we all know about it. It's just a quick the overview of what we understand traditionally when we talk about Renaissance. So the most important part of Renaissance is that it tried to reject any notion of superstitions or irrational thought. It actually, when we talk about Renaissance, it did emphasize on rationalism. It did emphasize on critical thinking, analysis, and thereby it negates any form of the irrationality that was very much identified in the Middle Age or the Dark Ages. and thereby it did emphasize on the notion of this critical thinking. Skepticism was a part of the Renaissance era, and when we talk about skepticism, we are not giving a very negative connotation to it. Rather, we try to explain it from a very positive perspective. So when we talk about skepticism, it is the questioning attitude that we are not going to take anything for granted. Rather, we'll analyze, reanalyze, revisit, and thereby would come to a conclusion. Thereby, we'll be producing an order of truth that could be further extended for the benefit of the society. So it did encourage non-religious studies, celebration of the human individuality and moral autonomy. So these are the components which are very, very important when we talk about Renaissance, because it was a time when human individuality, the man as the measure of all things, that was prioritized. That we have our own identity, we have our own individuality, we are the agentic being of the society. So when we talk about agentic being, we are talking about the humans who have this ability to introduce positive change in the society. We are the actor. We are not governed by someone. Rather, we are the governor of our own self. So, as I did say that, it did emphasize on the importance of observation, critical analysis, and creativity. And it also did emphasize on the role of the poets and the writers who can actually bring positive change, a positive approach to society. And then it finally says the dignity of the human being has to be emphasized. And the most importantly, why I thought that, and many other scholars, when it comes to Shakespearean scholars, as well as the post-humanist scholars, they did say that it is possible to analyze the Renaissance England and the literary depiction of the society as it was constructed by Shakespeare in the Elizabethan time through the lenses of post-humanism, because finally, when it comes to Renaissance, it did ask one fundamental question, and that is what it means to be human. So when we talk about the Renaissance, human takes the priority. So in this YouTube video which we were all watching, the way it was narrated, it was said that how these people, for example, you can take the Richard the Three. He says that I am a person who is not able to appeal anyone because of the deformed feature that he has. He thereby decides to become a villain. So it is said that he is the deciding factor here. He is the agent who is bringing all the possible events that is being very much generated or engineered by him. So the villainous circumstance, the toxic circumstance that we do read, reinterpret when it comes to Richard the Three, they try to emphasize on the point that it is Richard the Three who has actually engineered the villainous plot, and thereby bloodshed is the ultimate conclusion to everything. Now, when we I will be talking about this very fundamental fact that what was the assumption when traditionally we try to understand the Renaissance period is that it actually produced a rapture. That means it tries to break from the Middle Age or the Dark Age. There is a complete breakage, and thereby all the literary works or any artifacts that we are reading or interpreting pertaining to the Renaissance England, they actually does not have any trace of Middle Age or the Dark Age, right? So when we talk about Renaissance, I would like to emphasize that we can also try to understand it as an epistemic structure, as a knowledge system that did try to produce a rapture from any kind of skepticism, mysticism, irrationality that was very much afforded, or to an extent that was rooted in the Middle Age. So Renaissance, but when we talk about this human, I would like to take 2 3 minutes to reflect on this concept of human, because this will also be very much resonating in the later parts of my slides, where we'll try to understand how these humans are actually critically analyzed in the Shakespearean play through the lenses of post-humanism. So when we talk about human, we generally, when we open our traditional history book, when we generally try to listen to any lecture pertaining to English literary period and more specifically Renaissance, they say that humanism was very much prioritized. Human is considered to be the measure of the all thing. But we should also not forget that Renaissance was also the time when the first wave of colonialism started. It was the 1500s, somewhere 14, when, if I'm not wrong, Columbus, yes, he started making the discoveries. So it was the time when the first wave of colonialism started. European people started going out of their continent and they started exploring the world. And in that very exploration they did produce a few binaries that I believe that we all know. None of us are not, we cannot say that we are not aware of the fact that when we talk about colonialism as a culture, colonialism as an economic system, we just cannot explain colonialism without talking about the binaries that colonialism did create. So when we talk about this notion of human, right, what it means to be a human, and this autonomy, agency, individuality, morality, intellectuality, rationality, all these components, all these attributes that we do associate with the human, we do need to reflect for a second about the notion of the human that we are studying, about which human we are talking when we are talking of the Renaissance. We all know that when we talk about human, we are actually talking about this ideal figure of the human, which is the Vitruvian man, right? The classical ideal of the ideal man. And when we talk about this ideal man, we are talking of the white, able bodied men, right? So, and when we talk about this white, able bodied men, we are trying to produce a binaries with other orders of men that we can actually encounter in our society, that are actually in reality existing in our biosphere, in this topography that we are sharing with others. So when it comes to Renaissance humanism as a school of thought, right? So let's come to this slide. So when we talk about the Renaissance humanism as a school of thought, they say that all this notion, the features that I did read out to all of you in the very first slide, the key features of Renaissance that we talk about, right? Rationality, the key features like morality, autonomy, all these factors that we have been talking so far, they are actually associated with a particular order of human that is very much white in its nature. And they say that traditionally what we understand by Renaissance is it's not actually, it's only one particular discourse that has been emphasized so far. There were other discourses pertaining to Renaissance humanism that we really need to revisit and thereby critically analyze if we really want to understand how Renaissance, or more specifically Renaissance humanism as a school of thought, did lead to the emergence of multiple discourses about the culture, about the knowledge, about the human, and how they are getting reflected in the literary world. So this is the so as I say to you that in this in my session, I'm not going to emphasize on the traditional understanding of Renaissance. Rather, I would like to emphasize on the understanding of the Renaissance humanism that has tried to revisit the world of Renaissance, and thereby they have helped us to understand that there are other discourses pertaining to Renaissance humanism that is also very much covertly, or in a very covered way, or not in a non-distinct way, is getting reflected in the Shakespearean drama. Right? So when we talk about the Renaissance humanists, demonstrate that a close reading and a careful restoration of the ancient texts. We all know that when we talk about the Renaissance, it emphasizes on revisiting the classical texts. So when they are talking about the revisiting of the classical text, they say that they could be actually reanalyzed to understand the multiple discourses pertaining to the human, the multiple discourses pertaining to the epistemic system, that is a knowledge systems that are very much fluid, diverse, and were generating at the same. Not all that, not the only one epistemic system, but other epistemic system, other knowledge systems that were very much there, but was not getting the mainstream attention. Rather, they were very much peripheral. So, when Renaissance humanism underscored the significant advantage to expertise in grammar, rhetoric, ancient language, and literature gave to thinker and maker. And what they say is that if you really revisit that time, if you really go back to the Renaissance world, you'll be able to see that the the thought process of posthumanism, which I'll be explaining very soon, the thought process of a very fluid understanding of human, the thought process which actually questions all the form of binaries that were upholded at the time. And when I talk about the binaries, for example, the binary of rationality and irrationality, the binary of human and non-human, the binaries between machine and human, the binaries between organic and inorganic world, all these binaries that were actually conceived to be upholded by one school of thought was actually negated by other schools of thoughts that were very much existing there. So this is what is being articulated by the scholars like Campana and Messiona in 2016 work, where they say that thinkers we associate with Renaissance humanism put an emphasis on textual criticism and historical context and champion the idea that all authors and texts remain full of new insights and ideas, concepts and mindsets that might very well illumine even the most obscure and intractable problems of the politics and life in general. So here we can locate the significance of Shakespearean the literary works. We most of the, for example, yeah, we are in the 21st century, and many of us, for example, researchers, we are very much reluctant to revisit Shakespeare, to be very honest. We say that Shakespeare is very much read, reinterpreted, and we are done with him. We don't have anything more to talk about Shakespeare. To an extent, we are reluctant. We don't think that Shakespeare has relevance to talk about the problems that we are facing in the 21st century. But when it comes to the current Renaissance humanist scholars, they emphasize on the fact that if you revisit Shakespeare to different theoretical, literary, and critical lenses, you'll be able to identify that Shakespeare is still having a relevance in the 21st century, where all the fluidity in our thought process, all the fluidity that we are able to identify in the epistemic system of the current society, where science, technology, mysticism, skepticism, all are coming together in order to produce an understanding of human that is very much reflected in Shakespeare's world as well. So, they say that when it comes to Renaissance humanism, it tries to talk about the human that is embedded and embodied in. Now, you let me take 1 or 2 minutes to explain that when we talk about the humanism in general, and okay, I should also be making this point very clear that when we talk about humanism, it was never actually distinctly articulated during the Renaissance time, and the connotation that it did carry, humanism as a Latin word, the connotation as it did carry at that time does not have its significance in the 21st century, because when it comes to humanism, way back in the 14th and the 15th century when Renaissance started, it was actually used to talk about the liberal arts education. It was not actually associated with the human and the way we try to understand the existential context of the human in the 21st century. So the humanism, the way we interpret it today, goes back to 19th century. So when it comes to the Renaissance humanism, they say that if you really go back to the literary world of Shakespeare, if you really go back to the world of the pre modern era, you'll be able to see that they have actually created human who are embedded and embodied, in the senses that they are not actually celebrating or emphasizing on the binaries that we are actually explaining today, the binary between the mind and the body. For example, many of us would be knowing that there was a time in the 18th and the 19th century, the age of reason, where mind was prioritized and the body was never given due importance, and thereby we have the feminist study where body was revisited. Similarly, when it comes to the binary between human and non-human, organic and inorganic, the biosphere and the human, all these binaries were contested. Rather, they have presented a very fluid understanding of the human that is very much entangled and embodied in the social structure in which they to which they belong. So this is what they say, that when you talk about the Renaissance humanism, it analyzes human embedded and embodied and evolving with and decentered amid a weird tangle of animals, environment, and vital materiality in the works of the 14th and 17th century. So they said they are emphasizing, the scholars of Renaissance humanism, what they are emphasizing is that post-humanism, which we are today talking about as a literary and a critical theory, it is not a very new phenomenon. Generally, when we talk about post-humanism, we say that it actually did start approximately in the 1960s. It was a time when man and machine conversation did start. But when we go back to the Renaissance humanism scholars, who are also actively very much working in the 21st century, they say that post-humanism is not a concept which is very much distinctly articulated. Yes, the word post-humanism, the term post-humanism is distinctly articulated in 1960s, but the features, the concept, and the way we try to they try to see the society is very much reflected in the 14th and 17th century literary works as well, where they did talk about this entangled and the complex understanding of the human, which is not a finite form. So generally, when we talk about the human, we try to see it as a very distinct body. That it is when we talk about a rational mind, when we talk about a mind with rationality, we say that it is a mind that is the decider of itself. He is the decision maker, right? But when it comes to the Renaissance humanism, they say that this very notion, the rationality that we have been celebrating so far, is itself an illusion, because this very construct that we call rationality, the deciding self, the individualistic self, that is very much influenced by the social structure and the other animate and inanimate matter with which we are sharing this biosphere. So that is what they have been emphasizing. And they say that Renaissance humor should not be reduced to a handful of iconics and caricatures. So when we talk about, I'll just take you quickly to this picture. So whenever we talk about the Renaissance time, we generally try to say that this is what is Renaissance. It is the celebration of human, right? But we should also be very much clear about the fact that the celebration of the human that we have been traditionally doing so far is the wide, able-bodied human that we have been celebrating, and it is only one particular thought or one particular school of people who have been celebrating it. There are others who are very much aware of the fact that there are other orders of human, there are other orders of rationality and irrationality, there are other orders of epistemology that we have to take into consideration whenever we are trying to think about the human as it is being dramatized by Shakespeare. Because apparently, as I said, when we were just watching the YouTube video, apparently will be very much talking about the fact that the we are the deciding self. Richard actually concluded to the fact that he is deformed. He is not very much aspired by any, he is not very much aspired by any women, good looking women. He does not have a desirable position in the society. So finally he has come to the conclusion that yes, sure, so I should be the villain. Similarly, if you go to Hamlet, we try to see Hamlet as a rational mind, Hamlet as the deciding self, to be or not to be. So it is he and his monologue that we will be trying to analyze as someone that is a portrayal of a thinking mind. But when you talk about the post-human scholar, they have a different narrative to talk about Richard. They have a totally different explanation of the Hamlet's ambiguity. They have a totally different explanation of Macbeth and the position that is assumed to be actually engineered by the protagonist who are enacting the play. So now, when it comes to the scholars of Renaissance, they strongly argue that the theoretical and the critical post-humanism, whether knowingly or not, has its root in the remains and offshoot of Renaissance humanism. So this is what I say, that why there is a ground to bring post-human theory to revisit the work of Shakespeare. Is it really justified? One thing I should be very much clear here, that sometimes we try to apply the critical theories forcefully. Sometimes they might not be having a due application, but since we would like to make our work trendy, since we would like to make our research work more fashionable, updated, we'll try to force critical theory on the literary work and would like to give an interpretation. But when it comes to Shakespeare, although written in the 60 although written around the 16th century, so it does have ample scope to accommodate the post-human concepts, because at that time also the fluidity, diversity, and the binaries were being questioned by the playwright, by Shakespeare, covertly or in an implied fashion. So now, since I have explained there's the ground, the requirement, or the reason why I'm revisiting Shakespeare through the critical lenses of posthumanism, I'll be taking at least 5 minutes now to give you an explanation of what is posthumanism. So, when we talk about posthumanism, we cannot talk about posthumanism without taking into consideration transhumanism. And we have to be very clear that there is a distinction between posthumanism and transhumanism. So, when we talk about transhumanism, it has its root in rational humanism. So, when we talk about rational humanism, what it does is that, first of all, we have this assumption that posthumanism is actually about the amalgamation of the AIs. Posthumanism is actually the amalgamation of the technology and the other organic and inorganic matter. But when we talk about posthumanism, it is not solely dependent on this dismantling of the binaries between organic and inorganic matter. Rather, when you talk about the transhumanism, it actually emphasizes on the extension of the humans by the usage of the prosthetics. It actually talks about this man to be the center of everything. It actually re-emphasizes man, and again the very notion of the man as it is being proposed by the liberal humanism, rational humanism, where human perfectibility, rationality, agency were duly emphasized. Okay, so when we talk about transhumanism, it actually talks about the extension of all the Renaissance concept, the main discourse, the mainstream Renaissance concept of rationality, agency, critical thinking, critical reasoning. But when it comes to post-humanism, it is not an extension of humanism. It is not an extension of the rational humanism, which actually emphasizes on one particular understanding of the thought process. Rather, what it does is that it decenters the very notion of the humanism that we have been celebrating so far. It decenters the human as the sole actant of this biosphere. It actually interrogates the human as the sole actant who is not being influenced by anyone else. Rather, what it explains is that it decenters the human by its imbrication in the technical, medical, informatics, and economic network. And posthumanism deconstructs all the form of binaries that exist between organic and inorganic, rational and irrational, and other epistemic orders. So when we talk about this, as I say to you, that when we talk about this Renaissance as an era, it emphasized on the fact that there is a quick rapture, that suddenly everything was broken. Suddenly we were too rational, too analytical, too critical, and we were not very much influenced by the mysticism, superstitions that were actually having its root in the Middle Age. But when we talk about when we talk about Shakespeare, and when we talk about the Shakespearean tragedy, I believe that, and many post-human scholars and Shakespearean scholars do believe and emphasize that we just cannot do away with the significance of the astral bodies, the significance of the presence of the animate and inanimate matter, the significance of spectrality, spectre that we say, the shadowy presence of the ghosts in the plays that we have been reading and interpreting so far. For now, as I say to you, that is there a possibility, is it really possible to revisit Shakespeare through the post-human lenses? So we have established scholars who have published edited books. It's just like Stephen I just don't know how to pronounce him correctly. So Stephen Harbricher and even Callis, where they talk about the post-humanist Shakespeare, where they did interpret Hamlet, that they interpret the existential crisis of Hamlet through the lenses of the post-humanism. Similarly, we have another very recent book by Karen Draber, published in 2018 by the very prestigious publication house Bloomsbury, where they talk of the Shakespeare and Posthuman theory, where Karen Draber has done is that she has tried to talk about the cosmography of the Shakespearean world. I will be explaining the notion of the cosmography soon when I'm talking about Hamlet, Macbeth, as well as Romeo and Juliet, the three plays that I have taken in order to extend my argument. So she has talked about the cosmography of Shakespeare, how these astral bodies, how these inanimate and animate matters are influencing the minds of the human who are enacting in a particular circumstance. So, and similarly, this is the Renaissance post-humanism, which also emphasizes on the or emphasizes on the existence of the concept of the post-humanism in different format in the literary works of Shakespeare. So now, as I have given you the background and the critical theories to an extent I have explained, so now let's come to Hamlet. So I believe this is one tragedy we all will be knowing as English literature student. The time we do enroll for BA or MA, we have to read Hamlet. And if we haven't read Hamlet also, but somehow this very concept of to be or not to be, this ambiguity, this monologue of Hamlet will be haunting us in the entire journey as English literature student. So, when we talk about Hamlet, primarily we should be agreeing to the fact that Hamlet actually emphasizes on the existential question of being a human. That how this very existential crisis in which he is in. He is a rational minded person. He has this very faculty of contemplating on the situation, measuring the consequences, pros, cons, and everything. And thereby, he comes to a point where he has to act, but there is always a delay in his act. So this is what is Hamlet, with his rationality, with his reflection, with his reflective mind. He tries to analyze the entire situation so that he does not want to make a wrong he doesn't want to take a wrong step. His judgment should be judicious. That is what is being emphasized in the entire play. But now, when we are talking about Hamlet, we should also be very much aware of the fact that the very thought process of Hamlet, the very germination of the idea that he has to take the revenge, is being triggered by the non presence of a father figure. So it is being assumed that that is the ghost of his father. If you read many critical work, they always say that Hamlet assumes, and it is the to an extent it is the father figure that has come in the form of a ghost to influence this to Hamlet's mind to perform a particular task. So the revenge that is being implanted in Hamlet's mind is being triggered by the very presence, and as well, it's not the presence and the absence. Rather, what we talk about is the spectral presence of the ghost. So when we talk about the non-presence, so if you are aware of Derrida's work, that is the specter of Marx, Marx, the specter of Marx, you'll be able to see that how this notion of ghost, how this notion of hauntology, and this very experience of uncanniness is being emphasized in Hamlet. He knows as well as he does not know. There is always there. It is it there is a rationality, but as at the same time, the rationality that Hamlet is demonstrating at the time is very much geared by the presence and the absence of a father figure that he assumes to be his father. So, the presence of the ghost, the presence of the unreal or the non real is very much triggering the thought. So, this is what is post human analysis, where we try to dismantle all the binary and thereby we try to emphasize on the spectral figures as well and how they are influencing the thought process and the action of the person who is actually portrayed as an individual mind, who is actually portrayed as a very rational mind. Now, when it comes to the play, this is a very striking passage that we can identify when it comes to Hamlet. When he says, "What is a man? If a cheap good and market of his time be but to sleep and fed, a beast no more. So sure he that made us with such large discourse, looking before and after, gave us not that capability and godlike reason." So when he says that what is a man, he is a, so when we talk about man, the one distinctive feature of being the man is that we have the power of speech that actually creates the binary between the animals. But now, this very question of what is a man, first of all, which, as I say to you, that when it comes to posthumanism, the fundamental query that posthumanism is making is what it means to be human, or what does it mean to be human? How are you going to define a human? So the same question is very much resonating in the Renaissance humanism, and specifically in the work of Shakespeare, when he asks, "What is a man? Is he, and how are you supposed to distinguish the man from the other, or the other life forms? Because we are able to distinguish ourselves because of the speech, we are able to distinguish ourselves because of the rationality. But now that rationality that we are demonstrating, is it the rationality that is very much engineered by the body in which it is being formed, or is it very much influenced by the circumstances in which the person is embedded? And this is what is considered to be the embedded and entangled understanding of the human, which is wonderfully dramatized in the Shakespeare's play. So let's go to the next slide. Again, what piece of work is a man? So you will be able to identify that man, this very examination of what is a man, what is a human, is very much resonating in the works of Shakespeare, and it can be extended to other plays of Shakespeare as well, which is not limited just to Hamlet, Macbeth, or Romeo Juliet. But it is the ability to understand from where this notion of rationality is germinating, because posthumanism says that rationality is an illusion, that it actually germinates from the individual self. Rather, the order of rationality that we embody is very much influenced by the circumstance in which we are born. So this is what he says: what piece of work is a man? How novel is reason? How infinite is faculties in form and moving? How express and admirable in action, and how like an angel is apprehension? How like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals, and yet to me, what is the quintessence of dust? Man delight no, not me, nor women neither. So apparently, in our traditional literature classes, when we will be interpreting this particular passage, we actually emphasize this on a very positive note. We don't take it as a question, rather we actually interpret as a fact that he is emphasizing on the beautiness, he is emphasizing on the significance of the man, that man is a rational being, he is an admirable creature. But when it comes to the post-human world, when we are trying to understand it through the lenses of posthumanism, we actually read it as a piece of interrogation. That what piece of work is man? How novel is reason? As I say to you, that when we talk about reason, it is just an order of epistemic system. The reason is just one particular order of knowledge that we have, but that very order of knowledge is very much influenced by the other order of rationality and irrationality in which we are interacting, right? So when we talk about this very concept of rationality, that the very concept of rational man, the individual man, we should be very much clear about the fact that it might also be interpreted as an interrogation of the very notion of the beautiness of the man that has been highlighted. We generally say that Hamlet is an ideal example of individuality. Hamlet is an ideal example of a rational mind. Hamlet actually talks about human, but we also see that there is a kind of skepticism that is very much implied in the very discourse of Hamlet. And as I said in my explanation, that Hamlet is a play that cannot be interpreted without the non-present, without taking into consideration the non-presence of the spectral figure that has been influencing his mind. It was the spectral figure of the father that has actually germinated the very notion of revenge in him. And thereby, he actually gears his thought process to design a strategy to actually realize the revenge plan that he has. But now, as I say to you, that we have to take into consideration that to what extent this reason is possible from his end. We are negating mysticism, we are negating superstitions, we are negating anything that cannot be validated through our senses. This is again is what is that is against the one of the components of humanism that has been celebrated in the Renaissance era, that knowledge has to be there has to be access through the senses. And when we talk about senses, we are talking of the facts that can be seen, visited, observed, and examined. So, in the age of examination, in the age of when we are actually emphasizing on research, discoveries, and innovation, we are talking about science, we are talking about rationality. At that time, we cannot deny the fact there's this very notion of rationality as it is being demonstrated by Hamlet is very much influenced by the non-presence of a spectral figure whom we are taking to be the what to say, the primal point from where the revenge starts to make its presence. Similarly, when we talk about Macbeth. So when we talk about Macbeth, I believe that Macbeth is not Macbeth without the three witches. We all have been reading about the three witches and how they have been influencing Macbeth. So as I say to you, if you really read the tragedies of Shakespeare, you just cannot read Shakespeare without taking into consideration the spectral figures that have been influencing the protagonists. So now, when we talk about Macbeth, it actually dramatizes the friction between the free will and predestination. So if our life is already scripted, if our life is already destined to follow a particular path, what is the role of human again? What is the role of Macbeth? Macbeth was destined to kill Duncan, as it was the prophecy that was being made that he was destined to follow the criminal path. So, if that is the case, then the post actions of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, how are we going to interpret it? So when we talk about, so here when it in Karen Barrett's work, she actually talks about this notion of cosmography, the notion of the astral figures. So when we talk about human in a very rational self, we do not actually pay attention to the irrational objects that encompasses us. We always try to say that we have to understand truth, we have to discover knowledge through the factuality, through our senses. But when it comes to these spectral figures, when it comes to these three witches, when it comes to the haunting image of the father figure of in Hamlet, we are just not in a position to say that they can be actually analyzed through a rational mind. Rather, the very thought process is being generated from irrationality. So what I am trying to emphasize in my presentation is that we have been conceiving the fact that there was always a binary between rationality and irrationality, mysticism, skepticism. There was always a binary where we have the critical thinking, factual mind, and then in the other half we have the superstitious, prejudiced mind that the Renaissance have evolved. But that is not the case. Somehow that rapture is never possible, as it is being said that when we talk about post-human, when we talk about the post-human cannot be posed without taking into consideration the humanist culture through which it is actually getting influenced. So similarly, when it comes to Macbeth, although we have apparently the very notion of individuality, the very notion of rationality that has been celebrated, but we should also be very much clear about the fact that covertly, in a very implied order, the irrational discourses that have been that were very much a part of the Elizabethan world did make their presence in the literary works of Shakespeare as well, where all the binaries were literally questioned if we really go through a very systematic and critical understanding of the works of Shakespeare. So this is one of the famous lines by the three witches where they say the fair is foul and foul is fair and hover through the fog and filthy air. So this is the Act 1 Scene 1 where the three witches do get themselves introduced, and there and we will see that how Macbeth gets influenced by those irrational selves, where actually when it comes to Banquo, he makes a very wonderful explanation that these three witches, they actually is not for, we cannot feed them in any of the categories. They are actually questioning any order of binaries, because it has been wonderfully stated by Banquo, the how far isn't called the forest. What are these? So withered and so wild in their attire, they look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet they are. Live you, or are you talk? That man may question, you seem to understand me. By each at once, her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips, you should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are. So you can see that they do not follow any kind of the binary. So we have been telling that, when we have been conceptualizing the fact that when it comes to the Renaissance time, these binaries were very much followed there. Rational, irrational, man, women, all these binaries were very much strictly followed. But if you really offer a very in depth study of the characters, the circumstance that actually led to the creation of the protagonist and the culmination of the tragic point, we will be in a position to analyze the who is actually engineering the situation. Is it the protagonist who are engineering it, or are they the victim of the circumstance in which they are embedded? To an extent, Macbeth has demonstrated his free will, but that free will also has a germination in an irrational event that actually will be negated by any scientific mind. So when we are talking about the three witches, and the way, if you really read the each and every line in the Macbeth, you will be able to see that all the binaries that we have been emphasizing so far, they are constantly deconstructed in the Shakespearean play. So, similarly, I would like to conclude my presentation finally by giving this example from Romeo and Juliet, another tragedy, where we'll be able to see that the significance of the astral bodies. As if, for example, it actually finally says that if we are living a scripted life, if our actions very much is scripted by scripted before the time we are born, who are we? What is our existence? What are we doing then? We are just just performing the role of puppet, and we have to complete our puppet show the time the script gets over. So in the very the prologue of Romeo Juliet, these two sentences appear, and they are very much being interpreted and reinterpreted by post-human as well as Shakespearean scholars. A pair of star-crossed lovers take their life, whose mid-adventure piteous overthrow do with the death bury their parents' strife, the fearful passage of the dead mark love, and the continuance of the parents' rage, which but the children end not could remove, is now the two hours traffic of a stage. This the which, if you with patience years attend, what here shall miss or toil shall strive to mend. So we were very much in the very beginning. They are emphasizing on this fact of the star-crossed lover, that they are somehow destined to be doomed. Their love will never be able to attain the fulfillment, because it is already been scripted. This not able to be successful. So this is what is the cosmography, or the impact of the cosmos, where we say that we are the deciders of ourselves. We are not being influenced by our circumstances. Rather, man is the maker of his or her own destiny. So if man is the maker of his or her destiny, how are we going to interpret the circumstances, these accidents, this predestination, this foretelling, these prophecies that we have been encountering in the plays of Shakespeare? So I believe that a very in-depth analysis of Shakespearean world through the renewed perspective of posthumanism will help us to understand how these binaries are further deconstructed in the Shakespearean world. I hope I have tried my best to make my presentation clear. If you have any question, kindly ask me. I'll be very happy to explain it further. With this, I stop my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Now I request Professor Basavaraj Donur, President Dharwad and Registrar Central University of Karnataka, to speak a few words. Sir, please.
Good evening. Am I audible, Prakash?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir. Please.
Uh-huh. Uh, I'm traveling. Good evening to you. I'm very happy that our colleague and Dr. Manali accepted our invitation and participated in our program and gave 1 hour wonderful talk on Shakespeare in the context of Renaissance. Uh, I think this is her second talk on Dharwad Katte. I listened to her presentation with my colleagues, Professor Vikram Visad, Professor Ganesh Pawar, and Professor Pooja. We all enjoyed her presentation. It was very scholarly presentation, and she gave a lot of insights too. Shakespeare is one writer who has never lost his to the readers and the public. Over 400 years, scholars and writers in India and across the globe have been talking about Shakespeare from many perspectives. And one great thing about Shakespeare is that he admits of different interpretations. We don't have one. Nobody can say the last word on Shakespeare's plays. You cannot, make a statement and say that this is the statement. No. This is the beauty of Shakespeare's plays, and his plays are full of wisdom and full of experiences, and we can learn a lot of lessons about life from his plays. This is the reason why Darwad Katte has started this special lecture series revisiting Shakespeare, and this is not the first time. This is not the first time that we are revisiting Shakespeare. During last 400 years, at many points in time, people revisited Shakespeare. As I said in the beginning, Shakespeare is one writer to whom we have to go back again and again and again and again. We have to visit him and revisit him, and we should keep visiting him for so many reasons. So, Dr. Manali's lecture today, gave a sort of justification as to why we should go back to Shakespeare. I'm very happy about her scholarship. I'm proud of her scholarship, and she's a young academic, and she has very bright future. And I thank her on behalf of Darwad Katte for having accepted our invitation and also delivered this wonderful lecture. Over to Prakash, and I request all the audience to interact with Dr. Manali. You can ask her questions or you can make your own observations. Over to Dr. Prakash. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Good luck
Thank
to
you, sir.
you.
Now I request the audience to interact with Madam.
I have one question here, Dr. Prakash. Why Middle
Please.
Age is called as Dark Age? So Malaysia, yeah. See, when it comes to the Middle Age, it is just categorized as a Dark Age because it is considered to be a time when superstitions, mysticism, all were having its very concrete root in the human mind. And it was also the time of plague, if you do remember. And it was also the time when Catholicism, religions, church, they were all losing their significance. All right. So that's the reason Middle Age is considered to be Dark Age. But if you really revisit it from a very scholarly point of view, you'll be able to find out new perspectives on the Middle Age and how it did contribute to the literary world as well as to the socio-cultural and epistemic structure of the English literary history. So Dark Age is just a marker that is being marked by one particular section of the English literary world. So you need to revisit it to see that to what extent this justification, to what extent you will be able to make a justification by labeling the Middle Age or the Medieval Age as a Dark Age. I hope I'm able to answer your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody would like to interact with Madam?
Yeah.
There are many appreciations, hundreds of appreciations we are receiving on our social media and in our WhatsApp group.
Oh,
Now,
is it in
Madam is
social media? I'm not in social media, sir. Thank you.
Madam, we have Dharwad Katte Instagram page and
Oh, that's
Facebook
great.
page, YouTube channel. We have
Okay.
Dharwad Katte has also launched its website very recently.
I will definitely go through it, sir.
Please,
Thank you.
madam, please,
Yeah.
please.
If
Yes,
you
dear
have, yeah.
participants, anybody would like to interact with madam?
Uh, uh, coaching class, I'm sorry. I'm not able to. Pavitra. Uh, are you asking about coaching class in general? Yes, of course. You can go for coaching class on literature, definitely, if you're willing to.
Yes, related to present talk or anything related to Shakespeare.
Yeah.
If
If you
anybody
want
would
to.
like to interact with madam, before I call it a day, before you think about your queries or your opinions, I have two announcements. Our next talk will be in Kannada, that is the first and second Saturdays. Uh, the details will be announced on our social media platforms and also in our WhatsApp groups. And Dharwad Katte has recently launched its website. Kindly visit our website. And Dharwad Katte has also announced two journals, one in Kannada and one in English. It's not a bilingual journal. We have individual journals, two separate journals, one in Kannada and one in English. I request all of you to circulate this news, and you also participate in sending us original poems, articles on current issues, and short write-ups. Kindly visit our website for the details and also our social media platforms. And all these talks will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, Dharwad Katte YouTube channel. You can also watch all the talks on our YouTube channels as well.
Okay. I have given my email ID, sir. If anyone would like to make any query, they can always
Sure, madam.
get back
Sure.
to me through my email.
Dear audience, you can also note down madam's email ID. You can also interact with madam. Yes. Before I call it a day, I come to the
Prakash,
end of the sir. Please.
uh, can you give the our website address? Can you share our website address with all the audience?
Hmm.
Yes, sir.
That
Yes, sir.
will be
Huh?
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Please do that, and you request all of them to visit our website.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I
Uh,
do.
uh,
Yes.
so it has become operational. Anybody can visit.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As I already mentioned, Dharwad Katte has launched its website. You can visit our website, Dharwad Katte, DHARWAD, KATTE, Dharwad Katte. The information on Dharwad Katte Kannada and English. All the information, whatever we say, it will be available in both the languages. As our audience are from across the country, we share all the information in both the languages. Please visit our website, and the detailed information will be shared in our all WhatsApp groups. We have 4 WhatsApp groups, official WhatsApp groups, and our YouTube channel, Instagram page, and also Facebook page. This is all for the day. I thank Dr. Manali Karmakar for accepting our invitation and giving a wonderful talk.
Thank
I
you, sir.
also thank you, madam. I also thank Professor Basavaraj Donu sir, President Dharwad Katte, Registrar Central University of Karnataka, for making it possible. I also thank all the members, Dharwad Katte, and our media persons who have been circulating our information about all the events in their electronic media and print media. Uh, I thank our media persons and all the audience who have been with us in our WhatsApp groups on this virtual platform and also on the social media platform as well. I thank one and all again. I call it a day. See you again. Next Saturday, sharp at 6 o'clock. Good
Bye,
night.
sir.
Stay
Bye,
safe.
everyone. Thank you. I'm
Namaste.
logging out.
Thank you.